a life coach that is trained to read people's energy fields and to use that in the process of coaching. And so, what does empowerment mean? We look around today in this day and age, and we see so many examples in politics about power over, and for me to be in power, that means somebody else has to lose power, and taking power away, giving your power away. And to me, that's not empowerment. That's not what true empowerment is. True empowerment comes when each of us has the opportunity to really discover and celebrate the light, the divine light that exists within each one of us, and is encouraged to have that shine more brightly through whatever process that might be, whether it's through a spiritual process, or in my case, a big piece of it has happened now through writing my story as part of this book. And what I believe to be what the truth that I hold is that when that light shines more brightly, it actually encourages everybody else's light to shine more brightly. That there's no, it's a win-win for everybody. There is no give or take. It's actually a win-win for all. And so there was a lot that I wanted to say today, and of course now I can't remember. I do want to start by just thanking everyone who's come. And most of all, thanking my husband, who's all the way in the back, helping me sell books, because without him, I wouldn't have been able to make this journey. He's been such an integral piece of it all along the way. And I just wanted to say a little bit about this book, that if you are inspired by what you hear, and if you choose to buy one, this is actually a compilation of stories written by 23 women. And they're personal stories, they're personal healing stories. And so on one hand, you could say that the common thread in these stories is either the fact that we've all been through some type of trauma or loss or grief. But the way I see the thread is that that's actually just the background information that you need to know to have. It's just the context. And that really what this is a book about. It's about women who are claiming their voices. It's about women who are finding that divine light within them, who are learning to view themselves more compassionately and to shine that in the world. And each story that I've read is remarkable. I've found myself, even if the actual circumstance isn't something that I've experienced, I still find myself in each of these stories. So with that, let me just go ahead and I'll start reading mine. So it's story 15, The Physical Side to My Love Affair by Meenal. I can pinpoint the moment when my love affair began. It snuck up on me, pulled the rug out from under what appeared to be my well-organized life, cleared away the fog. I awakened to long-lost sensation and emotions. For years, the relationship had been based on frustration, annoyance, shame, and betrayal. So no one was more surprised than I when out of the blue, a love affair emerged. Bear with me while I rewind 20 years ago to the beginning of the relationship. I had left my extended family in India and was returning to my husband, dog, and home in San Diego. I boarded the Cathay Pacific plane, exhausted both mentally and physically, as flights leaving abroad leave India at 4 a.m. in the morning. As soon as I settled in, I promptly fell asleep against the window, the seats next to me empty. Hours later, I woke up to find a large stranger sitting in the middle seat, his hand stroking my thigh. As I desperately tried to figure out the best way to take care of myself, I remember thinking, keep quiet. No one will believe you. It's your word against his. All that will happen is that he'll become angry and it'll be worse. So I squeezed myself into the corner of that economy class seat, trapped, unable to escape, and never said a word. In that moment, I left my body and began to live my life in my head. What I did not comprehend was the collateral damage. You see, in that moment, my libido shut down as well. For these past 20 years, whenever I would begin to feel the inklings of sensual energy within my body, it would shut down for absolutely no reason. My ability to feel a sensation disappeared behind a thick fog of nothing hurts, so everything must be okay. I did not realize that my ability to experience my husband's touch had taken on a superficial quality to it, as if my body were wrapped tightly in a clear coating that would repel everything and let nothing in. My emotions were dialed way down as my standard answer to "how are you feeling" became a habitual, sterile, automated "good." What I did not know is that my memories of joy and pleasure had taken on the quality of watching a movie where I could recall the memory, but the associated felt sensation had disappeared. From the inside out, I didn't know that there had been a change, other than the one crucial physical element missing from an otherwise deeply loving relationship with my husband. From the outside in, my calm, confident demeanor masked the truth from the experts. If not for my deep knowing that this is not how I meant to live life, I would have been yet another silent victim to my absent libido years ago. For the next 5 years, the extent of the damage was hidden by my lifestyle, climbing the corporate ladder, grueling work hours, reaching for that next promotion, striving to make our first house into a home. Doctors would tell me, "Have a glass of wine, all you need to do is relax." At age 30, when we began to talk about having kids, it was obvious that was placing the cart before the horse. Fast forward through 15 years of hormone treatment, psychotherapy, a 10-day intensive for couples at Masters & Johnson, extensive yoga therapy training, acupuncture, an official assessment at UCLA by world-class doctors featured on an Oprah show dedicated to this topic, and I found myself at the edge of 45, no closer to experiencing a breakthrough in my libido. If you were to ask me how I describe my relationship with my body, annoyed, frustrated, and helpless topped the list. Betrayed was on that list as well. How could I not be after all of the money I had spent, experts I had seen, techniques I had tried? After all that, what would it take to fix this? Ashamed was the one emotion I refused to admit to, though it has been there all along, lurking behind the scenes. All of this from me, someone who teaches about the connection between mind, body, and spirit. And then a year ago, I shifted my perspective. I can pinpoint the moment when I was lying on the massage table, listening to my new physical therapist casually mention the phrase "frozen and collapsed," a state in which trauma survivors' nervous systems are often trapped. The more she shared, I realized she could be describing me. I can pinpoint the moment because it was as if I had clicked a new lens into place, one where I could see these past 2 decades of mysterious and commonplace symptoms through the lens of my biology rather than my biography. I can pinpoint the moment because I shifted from being a victim of my body to being in partnership with my body. That's the moment when my love affair began. Allow me to rewind and retell my story through this new lens. Unknowingly, I had been living life trapped inside a deep layer of numbness, a word that literally means deprived of the power to feel or move. The challenge with numbness is that absence is the prevalent quality. Absence of feeling, absence of sensation, absence of emotion. Numbness looks so much like calm, it can be virtually impossible to recognize. The previous year, I had begun to develop an increasing awareness of a feeling of being tightly wrapped in a clear, impenetrable coating. At times feeling like I was trapped behind a thick, invisible wall, unable to experience connection with others. I had learned that deep pain can be hidden by unconsciousness and numbness, unseen and unfelt. I had already begun to wonder whether there was still another layer to the trauma that I needed to heal. So in that moment on the massage table, I made the connection. Frozen. No, she could be describing me. Yeah, I could be upset that none of those well-paid experts ever guessed the truth of what was going on with me. I can see so clearly that that would have been wasted energy when my energy was best spent on a quest to learn more about frozen and collapsed. What I've discovered is that my energy is a precious resource, literally trapped deep within me. Through this new lens of understanding, this is what I now know to be true. In that Cathay Pacific economy class seat, My nervous system had revved up to 60 miles per hour. My heart began to race, my breathing became shallow, and my muscles contracted as I sought to escape the stranger's hand that was pursuing me. Fleeing was quickly eliminated, as that meant climbing over my attacker down a known dead end into that overcrowded plane. I remember thinking, keep quiet, no one will believe you. It's your word against his. All that will happen is that he'll become angry and it'll be worse. A refrain that had unknowingly been locked deep within my subconscious 10 years earlier, when I was first assaulted at the tender age of 14. So I squeezed myself into the corner of that economy class seat, trapped like a helpless animal, unable to fight or flee, my voice silenced. I discovered that in that moment, my body protected me in the only other way possible. Like many trapped animals will do, my body froze and collapsed, as if dead, in the desperate hope that when I revived, the threat of danger would be gone and I could escape. Through the gentle, compassionate filter of frozen and collapsed, my perspective is opened, like a tight bud unfurling into a multi-petaled blossom. I can see now that sitting there and taking it wasn't a choice I made, but a biological survival mechanism. I can see now that my 60 miles per hour revved up fight or flee energy had a brake slammed onto it, literally trapping all of that energy deep inside of me. I can see now how a seed had been planted within me, so that any time my nervous system entered an aroused state, whether due to stress, anxiety, sensuality, excitement, or fear, my body would shut down for fear of being overwhelmed. This isn't an excuse for how I've lived my life. This is simply the reason why I've experienced life as I have. There's nothing wrong with me. My body has been responding in the only way that she has known. Unwittingly, for all of those years, I had become an accomplice in those long ago violations. In my impatience, running from one expert to the next in order to find the magic button or the magic pill, in commanding my libido to jump and feeling annoyed by the lack of immediate reaction, I had been perpetuating the cycle of violence against my body by my thoughts and behaviors. In believing my story that I sat there and let it happen, I was quietly and viciously beating myself up. Slippery, slimy, stinky shame was trapped deep within the recesses of my body, along with my long-sought libido. It was so much easier to get caught up in the socially acceptable pattern of overworked, overwhelmed overachiever than to sit with the dark, silent, numb, unseen corners of my being. I can see now that the urge to fight or flee had defined my relationship with my body for 20 years. And that's the key. As long as I was resisting, pushing, controlling, demanding, or fleeing, the frozen and collapsed pattern remained locked in place. My energy trapped deep within a thick wall of numbness, so far out of reach that I couldn't even see it, let alone feel it. What I learned on that massage table is that with frozen and collapsed, anything more energetic than stillness, patience, and compassion will cause the nervous system to contract even more tightly. Just like the cornered, wounded animal that doesn't know you, slow movements, patience, a soft voice, a gently outstretched hand, and tenderness are what work best to invite frozen to thaw and collapsed to expand. In that moment, when my perception shifted and I understood the biology of my trauma, my love affair with my body began. I began by asking myself questions. How would it be to love and appreciate all that my body has done for me? How would it be to offer that same patient, loving tenderness to my body as I would to a frightened, wounded animal? How would it be to slow down and truly listen to what my body has been telling me she needs for so long in the only way that she knows how? How would it be to accept and celebrate my body as a wise partner in doing this thing called life? Truly accepting and taking action on my answers scared the breath right out of me, because I could see they meant that I had to slow down, something I had absolutely no skill in doing after spending decades perfecting overworked, overwhelmed overachiever. And yet I knew that I had to take a step, any step down this path, because I knew deep within that this would lead me to a very different outcome from all of my previous attempts. For a change, I needed to be the driver in my life, the expert of my own experience, the lover of my body and my being. Thus began my quest to find those parts of myself that I could not see or feel because they'd been trapped behind the wall of numbness. You may wonder, how do you find the presence of absence? I did it by following a saying from my yoga therapy training. Yoga is the practice of bringing the light of consciousness to the unconscious. So I sought to discover those areas of my life where I had gone unconscious, and I was astounded by the depth and the breadth of my numbness. The depth of my physical numbness was revealed when my massage therapist leaned into a knot of tension in my hip for several long moments, and I couldn't feel a thing. I even had to ask, is there a knot there? That is how absent sensation had been for me. Thereafter, I began to speak out loud whenever I noticed sensation of any kind during my massage in order to reestablish the link between my mind and the truth of what was going on within my body. Through regular massage, I discovered that my ability to experience my husband's touch had taken on a superficial quality to it, as if my body were wrapped tightly in a clear coating that would repel everything and let nothing in. That is how flat my experience of life had been. Thereafter, I developed a vocabulary to describe the quality of sensation I was experiencing so that I could discern the difference between nothing and the varied richness of something. Then I discovered that my memories of joy and pleasure had taken on the quality of watching a movie where I could recall the memory, but the associated felt sensation had receded into the fog. That is how thick the foggy layer of numbness had been. Thereafter, I chose each week to prioritize seemingly mundane activities that I knew that I experienced as full body, that they would awaken my senses or they would fill me with joy. For me, these included watching dogs romp in the park, walking on the beach, or visiting a farmer's market to seek out fresh vegetables and fruit. Each choice was a chance for my body and my mind to reinforce a fresher, deeper, more vivid neural net of joy and pleasure. Similar to the pins and needles sensation that happens when the part of your body that has fallen asleep begins to wake up, I began to experience discomfort as well. Through the support of regular body work and yoga classes, I began to experience twinges, wobbles, and stumbles in yoga poses that had always come easy to me. I felt shocked to discover that my physical strength and sure-footedness was directly tied to the rigid tension interwoven within my shoulders, hips, and pelvis. That is how thick the armor had been in my body. Thereafter, I chose to approach my yoga practice as if I were a beginner, showing up for the first time in my continuing to transform body. In doing so, I could pay close attention to placement and positioning, thereby strengthening parts of my body unfelt and unknown for 2 decades. I smiled and said thank you with each wobble and twinge to celebrate with my body as she released yet another piece of that numb, tightly laced tension. I began to notice that I would often power through my day or find myself firmly in overwhelm, or at the most extreme, thoroughly depleted. I understood that these patterns were a sign that I was kicking up my fight or flight response as a source of energy, rather than relying on my emerging life force energy. I felt dismayed to discover how prevalent these patterns were in my life, that the overachiever in me had perfected, overworked, and overwhelmed. That is how deeply hidden my life force energy had been within my body. Thereafter, I chose to become an overachiever in noticing whenever I felt activated. In that moment of noticing, choice emerged. Do I continue down this route that I know so well? Or do I pause, take a breath, and ask myself, what can I change here? I discovered options that had been there all along, but unseen because I'd been running through my life in 60 miles per hour. And admittedly, some options, like saying no, were extremely uncomfortable, but it had become a matter of life and death for me. say yes to new life-enriching patterns, or continue in what I now knew had been life-depleting ones? While the choice seems obvious, at the time it was a moment-by-moment practice of remembering and choosing aliveness over numbness. Within this new enlivening chapter of my life, my body began to rewire herself, and I feel excited to write that my previously deeply trapped life force energy has begun to emerge along with my libido. It's a year later, and I wish I could tell you that everything is perfect. Honestly, I find myself in transition, like a caterpillar transforming with the deep down knowing that the butterfly will emerge. I wish I knew when that'll be, but I don't. And yet I can see evidence of tremendous change and inklings of what can emerge from these fresh, fragile, self-full habits. To stay on track, I must be vigilant in sifting through the elaborate stories that my mind creates, worthy of any soap opera writer, so that I can distinguish reality from fantasy. For example, 3 times in 3 months, I was able to ride the gentle rise and ebb of my libido without shutting down. In the past, my mind would create this story. Yeah, but when will I ever reach the Holy Grail and have an orgasm? In that self-defeating perspective, I'm beating myself up again for not being good enough, fast enough, skilled enough. I know where that path leads, and I'm done with that. So here's my rewrite, coming from that place of partnership with my body. Prior to this love affair, freely riding the wave of my libido had happened only once in 20 years. Now it has happened 3 times in 3 months. Wow. I never dreamt that I'd be challenged to revisit my perception of myself on so many levels, to love my body so deeply that I can even celebrate wobbly footing as evidence of my transition from frozen into aliveness. Much to my surprise, I find myself enveloped in a deep sense of wonder. Wonder at the tenacious strength in which my body has held on to this trapped energy in an effort to protect me. Wonder that my essence has deemed that now is finally the time for this layer of the trauma to come to the surface and be released. Wonder that I've held on to it just so I could learn to be compassionate, loving, and self-nurturing with myself. I can pinpoint this moment when my love affair with my body deepens, as I experience a moment of knowing the fullness of myself with more richness and vibrancy than I ever thought possible. Thank you. And I realized one of the things that I wanted to say earlier, and I think it's really appropriate to say it now. You know, so many people told me in advance, it's like, Meenal, I can't believe that you're going to get up and you're going to share this story in front of people. And it's like, oh my gosh, like I'd be really scared. And, you know, part of me was very anxious because I didn't know how this would be received. You know, I can imagine some people sitting there thinking, whoa, too much information. And then other people thinking, wow, I didn't know that about her. And honestly, both sets of reactions are really edgy to me. And what I had to realize for myself is that that wasn't the reason for me to do this. I wasn't doing it for the reaction. I was doing it for myself. And I was doing it to claim yet another piece of myself. And what I realized through all of this, just on Friday, and I was sharing with a couple of my friends, is that, you know, to me, this is a celebration, and this book itself is a celebration. Because the woman that I was before could not have written. I had to become who I am now in order to write this story. And that's really what this book is about. It's a celebration of the journeys that we go on and the compassion and the love that we can develop for ourselves. So thank you all for coming. You know, as I mentioned before, there's food in the corner. There are books for sale in the back. I have to figure out where I'm going to set myself up so I can sign them for you. But thank you.
Thank you.